Oh, hello. Welcome everyone. I'm Catfish Franklin and this here is Catfish Corner. And today's story is the first episode of my series that I'm calling Old News featuring Stagger Lee. Episode 1, The Alias. But before I get to that, I would like to send out a special thanks to C.D. Stelzer, St. Louis's own rogue reporter and man of the people. Without him, from a few different angles, this never would have happened, what I'm doing right now. So I would just like to thank him. Thank you, CD. I appreciate it. Hope you like what I'm doing here. And I would also like to thank you for stopping by here on YouTube. And, as always, I'd like to thank my patrons over there on Patreon. So, today's story, The Alias of Stagger Lee. What's the deal with this? Let's get into it. So, I've made myself some notes here on this crumpled, stained piece of paper. And I'm going to try to not get off track because there's a lot going on here. But first, I'm just going to give you a little introduction about Stagger Lee, or Stagger Lee. So, he is, some scholarly types have claimed that he is the archetype that was used to base the protagonists on in the blaxploitation films, including Shaft. Others have claimed that without Stagger Lee, modern rap and hip-hop music would not exist as it does today. Now, those are some mighty claims, and I don't know anything about that, but you can just start to see already this thing is really a lot more everywhere than it might look like at first glance. So, tons of movies. Of course, I know him from the song, which is sort of originally where it comes from. And it is said there are over 400 recordings of this song. Now, you might expect people like Mississippi John Hurt, Dave Van Ronk, or Woody Guthrie to have done this song, perhaps even Bob Dylan, which they did. But it's also plenty of other people too, like the Grateful Dead, the Black Keys, Nick Cave. It's everywhere. This song, there's many versions of this song. And something that is interesting about this song is that there's no standard chords or chord structure or lyrics even, really, to this song. As you would have, for example, with fellow Missouri boy, Jesse James, who was killed just 13 years before the Stagger Lee incident. Jesse James is always the same song. I mean, you can write more songs about Jesse James, but the ballad of Jesse James is always the same. Same chords, the same, sometimes the lyrics change around a little bit, but it's always, and Jesse had a what, Anyways, Stagger Lee is not like that. It pops up in all different ways and forms. So that's very interesting, and also brings us to our conundrum of this alias business, because his name is always different. Stagger Lee, Stack-O-Lee, Stagger Lee. What's the deal? What's the deal with that? So, it was at that point when I realized with my library card I could look at historic newspapers for free online. So I got to work pretty fast and started looking up Stagger Lee to see what I could find. So I would like to point out that these are just newspaper articles. I don't have any police reports or state records or anything like that. Maybe if y'all like this, I can dig up some of that stuff if it still exists. I've seen a lot of it reprinted by other authors and stuff like that, but I don't have that in my possession, so I'm not including any of that information with what I'm talking about today. Today I've got just newspaper reports, and I was able to uncover 101 newspaper reports. And 65 of them are in English, and 36 of them are actually in German. So for most of the episodes of this series, I won't be able to include the information in those because I don't know what it is. But I can use it here in the spelling of the names of the man known as Stagger Lee. So that's 101 newspaper reports that begin in 1887 and go all the way through 1911, with the biggest chunk being late 1895 to late 1897. So a 2-year period of heavy coverage there. So, what is the name of this guy? Let's get into it. So first off, this is another thing I would like to say, is that this wasn't always known. You know, at first this song just traveled around. The song is what spread it. People didn't know where he was from. It was a lot of people thought apparently that Stagger Lee was from Memphis and worked on the levee or something like that. But really, all of this stems from a true event in St. Louis, 1895, Christmas night. You can't make this stuff up. When Stagger Lee murdered a man named William Lyons. And so it wasn't until the 60s, I believe it was, that someone finally figured out who it really was. And it turns out to be a guy named Lee Shelton. And that is generally accepted that his name is Lee Shelton. But I would like to just go into it here a little bit. The newspaper reports basically bear that out, even though there are different spellings. So there's Sheldon with a D and Shelton with a T. So basically we see Sheldon kind of just peppered around in the reports, along with Shelton also, until 23 days after the famous murder, and then Sheldon is never seen again. It's always Shelton from then on until 1911. Basically we see Sheldon 12 times, and Shelton 79 times throughout the newspaper reports. So that does point to the fact that his name is actually Shelton. So that's a good place to start from, Lee Shelton. So the other thing that we find in the newspaper reports is that there are 2 nicknames for this guy. The first one is Stag, as in stag beer, and the second one is Stack, as in smokestack. So Stag is actually only seen 8 times in all, and only 3 times in English. And those are both in the 2 days after the murder. And then the German shows up for 10 days after the murder, for a total of 8 sightings of the name Stag. Stack, on the other hand, is first seen in 1889 before the murder. This guy was already known as Stack in the papers. And until 1911, we see that reference for a total of 73 times. Now, there were 20 articles where only Lee Shelton or Sheldon was used, and there was no alias provided. But 73 times we see Stack Lee Shelton. So I do have a little bit of a theory on this. It's not much, but I think it's basically just in the newspapers, it's due to not necessarily sloppy reporting, although it could be that, but also just like oral transmission reporting. You know, they're like, hey, what's this guy's name? Oh, it's Lee Shelton, Lee Shelton, Lee Shelton, Lee Shelton, Sheldon, Shelton. I don't know, it could go either way. So I think that accounts for it, and that could also account for Stag and Stack. Like, what's this guy's name? Stag Lee, 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 Stag Lee. You know. So, and I think, you know, that probably, hilariously, is also what accounts for all the different name spellings in the song as it was passed around. Stagger Lee, Stagger Lee, Stagger Lee, Stagger Lee, Stagger Lee, you know. So I find that to be very interesting. think that's about all I wanted to say about that. That is the alias of Lee Shelton, Stagger Lee, the man who murdered William Lyons. I think I've got a really decent sample size here of newspaper clippings, 101 clippings. And I think from that we can conclude that most likely the guy running around on the streets, the criminal in St. Louis in 1895, was known as Stagger Lee. So that's darn interesting if you ask me. So I hope you liked this. It was a lot of fun to research, and I've got a lot more coming. In the next episode, episode 2, we shall examine the murder itself. But I wanted to start at the beginning and get this guy's name down so we can go from there. So that's it for story time today. Thank you for joining me here, and I'll see you next time.